Turn to the municipal clerk to let me know when we are streaming. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Committee of the Whole. I call to order the meeting for Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. And I would like to call upon Ms. Smithers to do the land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So this summer gave us all good reason to reflect on the land that we live on. Personally, the Jasper wildfire changed up vacation plans for me, and the extreme wildfire hazard we faced here in town had me enjoy a staycation instead, so I could be close to home and close to work if the hazard turned into an event, which worked out well, actually, as we live in a pretty incredible place to have a staycation. The wildfire event in Jasper and the extreme hazard we face here are still top of mind for many of us. In fact, as you know, our manager of engineering, Andy Asarte, is currently up in Jasper assisting with their recovery efforts. And we continue work here in the Bow Valley to protect our community from wildfire risk. Wildfire and the risk of it is intertwined with reflections on the land and on Indigenous people as stewards of the land. Prescribed burning, sometimes referred to as cultural burning, dates back generations for Indigenous communities. Here in Alberta, many Indigenous nations used fire to achieve subsistence and cultural objectives, including rejuvenating the land and bringing back plants and medicines, improving settlements and trails, opening up animal habitat, and reducing pests. Today, an increasing number of Indigenous nations in Canada are working to reclaim cultural burning practices and to integrate these practices into community burn plan frameworks. There's much opportunity for agencies across Canada to learn about cultural burning and to build relationships and partnerships. Here in Canmore, I appreciate that an initial action of the team leading our community fire guard work was to reach out to Treaty 7 nations to engage with them on the project. While we won't decolonize wildfire management in one act, it is an important step in inviting traditional ecological knowledge into our efforts. So with that, and in the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge and appreciate that we are meeting today in the Treaty 7 region. This land is the traditional territory and home of the Stoney Nakoda nations of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstoney, the Blackfoot Confederacy of Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Battle River Territory District 4 Métis. As we gather in this Treaty 7 territory, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people. I commit to working to live in right relations, to advance truth and reconciliation, and to acknowledge the many First Nations and Métis whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. Pina mach.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smithers. Now move to the agenda for today. Are there any changes? Seeing none, I move approval of the agenda for the September 17th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We will now move to our delegations.
Yeah, so our first delegation is from Bow Valley Victim Services. I'm happy to invite Peter Quinn to come forward, who's the director. I also want to acknowledge, and you can sit wherever you like, but you're welcome to come up. Nancy Lewis and Kathy Resch, who are current board members, are also here. So as you know, Victim Services, as we know it, is changing, and so Peter's here to give an update on what is to come. So over to you, Peter.
Welcome to Committee of the Whole. It's bittersweet because it's always good to see you, but I'm not liking that this is the last time in this capacity.
Thank you for letting me join you today. It's always good to be here too, because I'm sort of here for two reasons. But with me today is my co-worker Pam Lockyer, who's I've worked with for 24 years, who's provided amazing services to the community over that time, and our board chair Nancy Lewis as well. And Nancy's with us as well, and then Kathy Resch is also with us, and Kathy's treasurer and one of our directors. But interestingly, Kathy's also one of the directors now of the new Southern Alberta Victims, got to get this right, Southern Alberta Victim Service Serving Society. So Kathy will be one of the directors of the new program as well. So, but I really I came for two purposes, just to assets. We finish up September 30th, but my real reason was just to thank the town, to let you know how much your support has meant to us and how much it's helped our program over the 30 plus years we've been in existence. Initially, it goes back to 93, and the towns gathered, Banff and Canmore, MD Bighorn, ID number 9 gathered and said, well, we've got some problems and we've got some issues, and we've got a good social safety network, but we've got gaps in it, and the gaps were kind of somewhat obvious. There was, like, Lucy Tamel had been murdered, and there was a need for specialised services for people that were struggling after difficult events. Like, I've talked to quite a few people over the years, and they sort of, back in those days, they worked at the hospitals in Banff and Canmore, and like tragic things would happen, and some of the staff there would just take people home. They had people that needed help, and in good consciousness, they couldn't just leave the people sitting there, so they just said, come and stay at my place today. It might have been their partner was bike riding with them and they were killed, or things like that. Were just terrible things, and so it's just people were getting help, but it was out of the kindness and spirit and the generosity of Bow Valley residents. So there was gap. They needed some sort of formal services. So there was, the community sat down, said, here's what our needs are, and I was fortunate enough to get hired in 94, and it was easy in many regards because of the blueprint had already been created. Here's what we need as a community. Can you make it happen? And everyone we worked with was incredibly supportive of that concept of trying to make and provide these services that were genuinely needed. So for me, it was wonderful to help the community out for all those years, and I'm proud to say as a program we helped 17,500 people over that time, and we were involved in like 9,000 different events, and maybe 2,000 of those events I would consider crisis, where people needed help straight away. We helped people in court 2,500 times, because back in the 90s, there was, and even still today, there's a pretty big imbalance between victims' rights and offenders' rights in the court process. So we were able to help balance that out a little bit. And we realized early on, I think, that you can do a lot of good by being reactive and helping people, but you can probably do a lot more good by being proactive and educating people. So that's what we did. We did education programs to like 28,000 people over the years. So we're really proud of all those achievements. Reached out to a lot of people, supported a lot of people, but it was a team effort 100%. It was working with wonderful co-workers. It was being supported by a very supportive board of directors. It was having wonderful people. Need help when they need it, not when you're available. So the timeliness of services can be critical. So we really wanted to provide as best we could 24/7 services in the Valley. So we had a lot of people come through our program as volunteers, just willing to help out. And they were kind, caring, compassionate, educated. A lot of them did it for a job, and they had the skills to provide that crisis intervention when they needed, and they were willing to commit to getting up in the middle of the night to provide that support. Like, one lady's been with us for 30 years. We've got multiple people that have been with us for 20 years. So many, I couldn't actually tell you how many have been with us for 20 years. So we've had an amazing amount of support from the community. So it's really, it was a model of the community saying this is what we needed, and then the community stepping up to fill the gap to help people in need. And none of those needs have changed over the years. So that was maybe part of the reasoning to be here today as well, is I really do wish the new program well. They'll be operational as of October 1st, and I hope they're doing important work, and I hope they'll get through growing pains, and I hope they'll provide the service that the community needs. But if you have the ability to give them any nudges or suggestions and say, here's what the community does need, sort of some of the suggestions would be to make sure they are able to provide in-person support to the community. If we needed these services in the early 90s, we need them even more now, because you can imagine 30 years later, a lot more people come visiting the Bow Valley, the communities of Banff, Canmore, Lake Louise, everyone comes here. So they have a right to have services in place when they need them. So, and those services need to be in-person services. You don't want to get a phone call from somebody who's 100 kilometres away is trying to provide services over the phone. We did that over COVID, and because of social distancing, that limited what we could do. And I can tell you firsthand, it doesn't work. It doesn't meet. It might sound nice on paper, but it doesn't meet the needs of people. People are wired to have in-person support when they're in crisis. It's as simple as that. They won't be providing transport. Sometimes people just need practical help. So we transport a lot of people when they're stuck here with nowhere to go. Their family member might have been flown into Calgary via Stars, and they just want to get the hell out of the Bow Valley as fast as possible and be with their loved ones. So we take them, and we connect them with social workers in the hospital they might be going to. So there's a continuity of services, but they won't be providing service. They won't be talking to groups. There's events that happen sometime where it makes sense to talk to people collectively, because people can share and normalize their experiences within their own little community. So it might be a work community, it could be first responders, it could be numerous things, but talking collectively has a lot of benefits, and then those individuals share their coping mechanisms of how they've gotten through those difficult events. So we've done that. So every 2 months, we've done that every 2 months we've been in existence, and it works well. So we're sorry to see that's not happening. We're sorry to see that education programs won't be continuing. So there's certainly gaps, and every program needs a chance to start, and every program needs to be measured on their merits as when they begin. And I'm hoping as they're moving along that you have the ability to share what you believe the needs of this community are, and they'll listen and they'll be able to adapt their program accordingly. But maybe most importantly, we couldn't have done it without the town's help. We couldn't without the support of other community agencies and sharing difficult times together. And programs need money. The most, apart from the first couple of years, the most the government ever supported us financially was 50% or less. But the towns never once blinked with the money we asked of the towns. The money was always there, and without that money, we wouldn't have been operational. Without a doubt, that was the money that kept us going. So for that, and for every request we ever asked of the town for 30 plus years, you were there like 100% or 120%. So thank you for all that support and making our 30 plus years what we believe to be a great success. So that's really why I was here today, just to thank you and let you know the money you invested in us and the help you gave us really did make a difference. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you, and I have a few comments I'd like to make, but I'd first like to open it up to my colleagues as to if they have any questions or comments that they'd like to make. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Quinn, for all of your work with Bow Valley Victim Services, as well as your team and the board. I think for myself, I have a unique understanding of the work that you do, because I, in my past career, spent a lot of time covering court and the judicial system, and you really start to notice how there is an imbalance around how victims are treated in that system. And to me, seeing Bow Valley Victim Services there supporting people who really didn't understand what was happening in terms of process. The court system, it's a black box, the court system. You don't know until you know what's going to happen, and it can be really uncertain and scary for victims or survivors of trauma and violence. I also grew up in the Valley, so I remember Lucy Turmel. I remember the change in the energy around the feeling of safety in our communities. And I just wanted to thank you, because you yourself have been in this role for quite a long time, and your staff as well. And I want to thank you for taking care of our community and taking care of our visitors to our community. And you leave an incredible legacy, even though we know what works, we still have to move forward with the model that's been created for us. But thanks to the work that you've done, we now know what success looks like. And I wanted to thank you for being that support for our community over the years. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Quinn, you're a champion. Thank you. What's next steps for you?
Oh, I've got
Yeah.
I've got lots of questions.
Yeah.
I was going to say angry old man on the street corner. That's a possibility. but maybe I'll shoot a little higher. I'm not sure. I'll just wait and see what unfolds for me.
Well, I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Quinn and Ms. Lockyer, both for walking alongside people at their darkest moments. I've had, many years sticking my hand in the air, approving the small budgetary item that you would get every year, but in 2020, I got to actually see how you do your work when a friend of mine had one of her darkest hours, and I just watched your team walk alongside her, and now she is experiencing success in life. I agree with many of the comments that Councillor Faubert provided. You have provided an incredible legacy in this community, and you are victim services for people. Like, your face has been the face, both you and Ms. Lockyer. So I wish you both all the best, and I wish you a bit of peace, because I think being in a constant stasis of being on edge, responding, waiting for that next call isn't always the healthiest for people as well. And so I hope you both have some time to reflect and relax before you decide what your next moves are going to be. And I'm grateful that you've had such an incredible board over the years. I just want to thank you very much for all that you've done for everybody in Canmore and in the Bow Valley. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mera.
I too would like to thank you, Pam, the board, your staff, all the volunteers for all your years of service. We, or the town, proverbial town, has provided the funds, but you provided the care, and I just want to say thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Quinn and your whole team. There's not much I can say that my colleagues already haven't, but sorry, a simple thank you for all your work.
Thanks.
Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Quinn. And again, just what everyone's already said, you guys did such amazing work. So just thank you so much, and hope that you all find some peace in the future.
Thanks very much.
And just joining my colleagues, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Pam, and Nancy, and Kathy, and all the boards, and all the volunteers who for many years have provided this essential service to our community. Of course, when this change happened, we were very happy to step up and advocate for the program. What we found out when we did that was that we were a shining star in the Bow Valley, that the program that was being developed was to address a problem that we were not having, but because we were a shining star and an exception, we actually find ourselves sad with this move, whereas many other communities are joyful. And that's because of the great work that you and your entire team have done. It's never been a doubt in my mind and in the minds of my colleagues when I've put my hand in the air to support funding for Bow Valley Victim Services, that this was a good investment, or a great investment in our community. And I just want to say, for the last 30 years, we have been blessed. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
All right, we'll now continue with our agenda. Item C1, for the minutes of the June 18th meeting, are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move approval of the minutes of the June 18th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now we'll move to Section D, staff reports. And number 1 is the Home Upgrades Program 2024 Pilot Update. Ms. Van Gaal, welcome to Committee of the Whole.
Hello. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Can Yasmin and Kristen, can you turn your cameras on, please? Perfect. Are we? Perhaps while you're. You might have to go in. Okay. We've got one anyway. Perfect. Yasmin is the one who will be leading the presentation, so hopefully we can get Yasmin there soon. I'll give a brief introduction while she's jumping online, and that's, oh, there she is. Perfect. Perfect. So as you know, my name is Caitlin Van Gaal. I'm the Supervisor of Environment and Sustainability with the town, and I'm joined here today with my colleagues Amy Fournier, the Energy and Climate Action Coordinator, and Tara Gilchrist, the Supervisor of Family and Community Support Services, as well as online with Yasmin Abraham, the President, and Kristen Wessel, the Manager of Operations for Cambo Energy Group. Cambo was contracted by the town in the spring of 2024 to deliver on a low-income energy retrofit program called the Home Upgrades Program. The Home Upgrades Program is designed to reduce energy costs and improve comfort, safety, and efficiency of homes with the primary target of helping to alleviate energy poverty. The program was developed by Cambo in partnership with Alberta Eco Trust Foundation and delivered in the City of Calgary and the City of Edmonton starting in 2023. As a bit of a background and as a reminder to Council, in May of 2023, administration presented to the Committee of the Whole the Renewable Energy Feasibility Study, which provided guidance on potential incentive approaches for low-income individuals. The results of that study show that the most effective way to deliver home energy retrofits to lower-income households was through a fully cost-covered program. This reduces the barrier for participants needing the funds up front or taking out a loan. In February of 2024, administration returned to Council to adopt the approximate allocation of funds with the previously approved $200,000 from the Sustainability Reserve. During that meeting, $74,000 was allocated to the low-income retrofit program. The Home Upgrade Program was delivered in partnership with the Cambo Energy Group and Community Social Development, using targeted programming and messaging to members of the Affordable Services Program. And with that, we are here today before the Committee of the Whole to provide members with the opportunity to hear about the Home Upgrades Program and to ask any questions of Cambo Energy Group. And so I will now hand it over to Yasmin with Cambo to start to share the details of the Home Upgrade Program in Canmore.
Thank you.
Abraham, welcome to Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I just want to do a quick sound check. Caitlin, I can see you. It's all good?
We can hear you.
Okay. And do you want me to share the slides? Or do you?
Yeah, if
I
you
see
want
the
to share your
slides.
slides, and then maybe just speak a little bit louder if possible.
Sure. Yes. Okay. It says I cannot share slides while the other participant is sharing.
At the podium here. We will not see them. Can you ask her to share? Try now.
Oh,
Yasmin,
now I
are you
can.
able to share your screen now?
I can, yes. Just give me 1 second. Okay. How's that? Great. And let me just go back to the start. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks, Caitlin, for that introduction. My name is Yasmin Abraham, president of the Cambo Energy Group, and so happy to be here today to chat about the home upgrades program that was delivered in Canmore. So just a little bit about us. Cambo Energy Group is a social enterprise that has been working for 15 years specifically to address energy poverty for underserved, underrepresented, and underfunded communities. We have been doing this for 15 years with our 3 programs: Empower Me, that delivers education for underserved communities; Community Power, that works specifically with Indigenous communities; and the Home Upgrades program, which is what we're here to talk about today. So just to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about what is energy poverty. And energy poverty is really a term that's used when households face and pay a disproportionate amount of their income on their energy bills. So similar to housing unaffordability, you might have heard if you spend more than 30% of your income on housing, it's considered unaffordable. The same is true with energy. So if you pay more than double the national average of your income on energy, it is considered unaffordable and you are considered in energy poverty. For folks that are in energy poverty, this is really, it's more than just a tight bill situation. These folks are stuck in a cycle of high bills. They go into bill arrears. They might have their utilities cut off, and they have very little ability to reduce their bills through energy efficiency. So energy efficiency will reduce your energy consumption and thereby reduce your bills, but you have to have the money to be able to install insulation. You have to have the money to do new windows. You need the money to upgrade your heating systems. And so it's really a challenge for a lot of folks who are struggling. The impact of this is far-fetched. Not only are you living in a house that's too hot or too cold, but it's often unsafe. And of course, there's lots of mental and physical impacts of living in homes that don't have the thermal comfort that is needed. Fully subsidized retrofit programs, as Caitlin mentioned, have been around in Canada since the 1970s. Until now, Alberta was the only jurisdiction in North America without a solution. And that's really the gap that the Home Upgrades program is trying to fill, is to support Albertans who are in energy poverty to improve their affordability. So the average energy burden that of applicants to our home upgrades program from Canmore residents was actually 9%. The cutoff across Canada is 6%. So we definitely saw folks from Canmore really struggling a lot more than what we would consider to be the cutoff. And the participants' average housing cost, so this just housing and as a percentage of their income, was 38%. So I'm sure you all know that there's a lot of folks that are really paycheck to paycheck and are really struggling. So how we got here, Caitlin mentioned a little bit. So Canmore, we have been advocating for this program for many years in Alberta. In 2018 and 2019, we delivered a pilot project in the city of Calgary for 130 homes, and that was thanks to the support of Energy Efficiency Alberta at the time. And last year, we launched the Home Upgrades program in Edmonton and Calgary for 200 homes with the support of those cities. And we were happy to include town of Canmore in that with 5 homes, thanks to the funding of the town. So what is the Home Upgrades program? Just talk a little bit about what we do. So households apply for the program, and us and our team and Kristen and her team look at the applicants and really look at 2 things. So number 1, what kind of home are they living in? Do they live in a home that has the potential to reduce energy with energy efficiency upgrades? That's the first thing we look at. The second thing we look at is who's living in the home and what is their income and what is their energy burden? How much of their income are they spending on energy? And that qualifies them for the Home Upgrades program. We go into their home and we do a home assessment if they're qualified to determine what are the most impactful upgrades. The program is really designed to create a scope of upgrades, a scope of work to install upgrades in each home that is most beneficial for that home. So we don't do the same thing in every home. We look at that home and try and figure out what does that home need to reduce the consumption as much as possible within the overall budget that we have. We work with local contractors to install some of those upgrades, and we also provide personalized education for each home. The program in Canmore was done a little bit differently than we do in Calgary and Edmonton, which is really great. It allowed us to really design the program for the needs of Canmore residents. So we worked closely with Tara and her team at the Affordable Services Program, which is I can't overstate how helpful that was to have such a direct connection into the community. It really just allowed us to quickly get into homes and not have to spend the time doing outreach and communications. And so that allowed more budget for us to do in the homes. The income levels that we use to qualify residents that we were typically using in Calgary and Edmonton were just not reflective of the realities in Canmore. So thanks to the feedback from the community and folks like Tara, we changed those to reflect what was actually happening in Canmore. And we were so thrilled to work with some of the local trades in Canmore. So Canmore Glass and Canmore Plumbing and Heating were our contractors, and they were fantastic. Okay, so what did we do? The results of the program. The Affordable Services Program sent an email to 70-something residents. We received 22 applications from that email. 13 of those qualified based on those qualification pieces that I mentioned. 7 of those homes were assessed and 5 of them received upgrades. And we worked with those local contractors to install those. These are all of the measures we installed across all of those homes. So it was about 62 measures it was exactly 62 measures and 8 energy savings kits were installed in these homes. What we found in those homes, most of those homes really had furnaces, really old furnaces, older than 1990. Some homeowners, regardless of their age, had to find roommates in order to get by. That's probably not a surprise to you folks. And so many of those homeowners, were really invested in caring for their homes. And so many of them were already doing everything that they could within their means. But some of these big ticket items are just beyond the financial means of that household. Here's some great quotes from some of the folks we work with. So, one person said, "I'm very fortunate to have a home, but it's hard to maintain. And with all the expenses going up, just trying to keep things afloat." And somebody else said, things like this make it more of a chance to be able to stay here longer. And we've heard that across the program, that these upgrades, they are improving affordability, but they're also relieving a lot of stress for folks who know that these big ticket items are going to be coming at some point. And so it allows them to really stay in their homes for longer. Some more nice quotes. We always have the best stories from folks. This person said, "It's nice that the town is getting on board. They're really recognizing that affordable housing is a big part of it, especially for the people who've already got housing. Being able to maintain that and being able to stay here, that makes a big difference." So what do we do when we crunch the numbers? The average lifetime savings in the homes, we're looking at 846 gigajoules per home of savings, which equates to about 52.3 tons of CO2 per home, and an average of $471 saved on energy bills per home per year. So that's, a pretty sizable chunk for somebody's budget to save every year thanks to these bills, or thanks to these upgrades. Some of the lessons we've learned, really, I think the partnership with the town of Canmore was fantastic for us as the organization delivering. Having such a close connection to Tara and Caitlin and Amy and the team helped just keep things moving quickly and smoothly. Some participants participated in the program, but didn't necessarily consider themselves low income. And I think we're seeing that across the country right now, especially in the last 5 years with COVID, that lots of people are slipping into financial state where they start to qualify for these types of programs, but they don't actually know it because they've never been there before. And so I think that's something that we're seeing across the country. the benefits and challenges of working with local trade. So lots of benefits, but also it takes time for trades to understand what this program is and how it works, and takes time to ramp up. And certainly our participants felt proud and grateful to work with a program supporting their local community. Our next steps, we will be continuing to deliver this program in Calgary and Edmonton, and we certainly hope that we can hope to continue to address households in Canmore as well. So I will stop there and I'll stop sharing, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much for that presentation. And I will look to my colleagues to see if there are any questions. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. So the operating budget for the program was $74,000. Did all that money go into the homes, or was some of that money used to pay for this third-party group to provide the services?
We were able to leverage the program that was already running in Calgary and Edmonton, and so the funding from the town of Canmore was able to go directly into those homes.
Awesome. And then how much longer does the program in Calgary and Edmonton have in terms of its future set?
Yasmin will be able to speak to this more, but as I understand it, they've got commitments from the city of Edmonton, I believe, until end of Q1 of 2025. At this point, they're looking to extend the program longer, and we're hoping to continue to participate in the program pending budget approval.
Yeah, just a quick correction on that. So Calgary is likely to continue until the end of Q1, Edmonton until the end of the year, but I'm hoping, and we're all hoping, that it'll extend beyond that.
Awesome. And then with the Calgary and Edmonton programs, how do houses qualify for that compared to our program?
Yasmin, I might get you to answer that question.
Yes, for sure. So it's very similar. It's one portal, regardless of where you live. You just identify whether you're in Calgary, Edmonton, or Canmore. So folks put in their name, their address, and we take some information about their income and their home. The only difference for Canmore was the income qualification the dollar amount was a bit different.
So in Calgary and Edmonton, participants didn't have to be qualified under another program like ours? That question. So we have the affordable program, affordable services program, and through that program, that's how we sent out the information. Does Calgary and Edmonton do that?
I don't believe so, and the Cambo's home upgrade program is set up to income qualify individuals, but because we had the affordable services program in place, we already had folks who were income qualified, so we didn't have to spend any money to do that part of the process, and we could streamline the qualification process from an income perspective.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
And then
it was fantastic.
it's felt like there was a limited number of homes on the affordable services program that would qualify. Are you, in consideration of the future of this program, could it be open to more of the community to apply, or would it be still within the affordable services program?
I think at least for the near future, we'd want to keep it within the affordable services program. I believe there's still homes that, as they learn about the program, as they talk to their neighbors and they hear word of mouth that the program is a success, that we will see further interest from affordable services members. The intent is really to do the co-benefit of affordability and equity along with GHG emissions. And so you want to be making sure that you're reaching the right people and elevating them potentially out of energy poverty through the program in order to get the full benefits.
Yeah. What I really like about, sorry.
I was going to say, we do have other programs that other members of the community can participate in, such as the solar incentive or the clean energy improvement program, that if you have the economic means or financial means, that there are programs for those folks.
Those are good points. I really like how it touches upon two types of crises, climate change and energy and affordability. I think those together. I also think that if we see more people aware of the Affordable Services Program as well and what it can provide, we might awareness increase the growth of the number of homes. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and through the two programs, the home upgrade program and the e-bike incentive program that you'll hear about next, membership and enrollment in the affordable services did increase as these were two different ways to promote that program as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that there was 22 applications received here. There's 5 on a wait list for a future year. So that's good. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I just get clarification on the savings part? So it's $471 per household for a year. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay. And so and we invested $74,000 in capital for capital improvements in those homes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Looking to see if there are any other questions. Seeing none, thank you to the folks from Cambo for joining us today, and thank you, Ms. Van Gaal, Ms. Fournier, and Ms. Gilchrist for your work in this program. Now we will move to the item, which is e-bike discount program.
Good afternoon, Mayor Cressard and members of council. Ms. Gilchrist and I are here to give you a summary of how the e-bike discount pilot program went this year. So we are going to be co-delivering this presentation. We'll just get a moment to get the presentation up. Oh, good. It was up.
Trying to make it full screen and I can't find it. Oh, there he is. There we go.
We might still be on the Zoom call. Okay.
Well, that didn't quite work out right.
I think it's
either.
not
Do you
us.
want to try? Okay.
All good. Excellent. Thank you. So what we'll do is give a quick background and then go into some of the details of how the program was designed. I'll hand it over to Ms. Gilchrist to go over the results, next steps, and then we'll open it up to answer any questions you may have. So the impetus of the program came from you with the approval of a $50,000 one-time budget for 2024 and direction to create an e-bike incentive program targeted to Affordable Services Program members. The program was really a great example of interdepartmental collaboration. So staff from Environment and Sustainability and Family and Community Support Services really led the development and delivery of the program with a lot of support from engineering as well as communications and finance. The program is really aligned to multiple council strategic goals, and with it we were trying to achieve multiple objectives. So these include reducing the cost of vehicle ownership for the participants, which can be quite substantial. So the number is usually around $10,000 a year to own and operate a vehicle, and it can be more. Another goal really is around the environment and livability goals. So reducing vehicle trips and the associated congestion in town, as well as tailpipe pollution, so local air pollution and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And there's also a big benefit with biking and e-biking in terms of the mental and physical health and wellness benefits that come along with that. So when we went to design the program, it was really done quite thoughtfully and intentionally. So with all things, we started out with best practices and research. So luckily, there are a lot of programs throughout North America that we could look to for guidance. There's also a lot of academic research in this area on how looking at these programs and the results and impact that they can have. It was very participant focused, and so there was a lot of participant input into the design of the program. So questions like around how much the participants could pay themselves for their portion of their bike to try to make sure that as many people as possible were able to participate. Participants were also advised well in advance of program launch so that they could start to save for their component and be prepared for when it did come. The discounts were aligned to other offerings to be consistent with the Affordable Service Program. So for example, the Elevation Place membership. So those percentages are aligned with other programs delivered through Affordable Services. We really wanted to maximize the use of the e-bikes as an alternative to vehicles. So a lot of thought went into how to do that. So things like ensuring that people got really good quality e-bikes, that they're properly fit for them, that they had the opportunity to get additional gear, such as baskets and panniers, so they could use them for grocery store trips, errands, collecting children. Some people ended up getting the ones with the back racks, or sharing bikes among family members. And lastly, we wanted to kind of keep it simple for everybody, for the participants, for the staff who are involved in administering this as well. And a lot of this led to our decision to focus the program and and deliver it through local bike shops. So that really helped make it more accessible because they were able to offer the at point of purchase discounts. It was a huge tenet of the program. So people didn't have to pay the entire upfront cost and get reimbursed later. It also made it really simple administratively and ensured that people got the right bike for their needs. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Gilchrist.
Thank you. Thank you. And so with that, we launched. And when we launched, we received 97 applications. And based on that research that Ms. Fournier mentioned that we had done, we knew we didn't have enough in our pot for 97 discounts. What we had learned in that research phase was that people could afford about $1,000 and that quality bike lived closer to $3,500. So the incentives or the discount that was set was 67%, up to a maximum of $2,400 for Tier 1 participants and 35% for Tier 2 participants up to a maximum of $1,300. So with those calculations, we had basically 19 Tier 1 and 3 Tier 2 recipients in terms of the funding pot. And that was very proportionate to who had applied and to the members on the program. We wanted to just make sure that we were being proportionate in how we did our lottery. So also in advance, we had warned people, this is likely to be oversubscribed. We will be doing a lottery. So we pulled those 22 names, and we also pulled some waitlist folks with the anticipation that perhaps some people might not use their full discount, or there might be people who applied who find themselves in different circumstances where they're no longer able to participate in the program. As we started to launch, we did see that come to fruition, and our final total ended up being 25 people participating in the program. It is of note that it says we had 22 Tier 1 and 3 Tier 2. One of those Tier 1 situations was a bit unique in that they were the last person on the Tier 2 wait list, and we had $1,259 left. So just shy of a Tier 2 full discount. We thought, okay, we'll offer it. When I actually pulled that last person, who was a family of 5, up, since they had applied, it had been a new tax year, and they were now a Tier 1 recipient. And so we still only had $1,259, so reached out to them, offered them the $1,259, and said, we will allow you to have a slightly less expensive bike. Still, you'll get the 67 kind of discount in terms of how that went, as we had seen that there was a couple of shops who had some still quality bikes at slightly lower price points, and they took it. So we had a bit of one unique situation that kind of skews the numbers at times throughout our data here. So, of those folks, we saw that of the Tier 1 22 participants, the average discount the town provided was $2,135, and that our Tier 2 participants all utilized the full $1,300 discount that was offered to them. With that, we saw folks buy bikes that were 11 of our participants bought city cruisers, 10 bought a hybrid of a city cruiser and a mountain bike. We saw 2 folks buy cargo bikes and 2 folks buy bikes that were classified as mountain e-bikes. We also, as Ms. Fournier mentioned, we saw 13 people buy additional accessories to help also with the uses that they would be utilizing their bikes for. Primarily, we saw panniers, locks, studded tires, things like that. At the end of August, with folks having had their bikes now for 3 or 4 months, we wanted to touch base, find out what has the impact been, how have you used it, is it meeting the goals and those objectives that we had set out in the design of the project. We had 15 of our 25 people respond to the survey, and what we found was 10 of the 15 rode their bike or utilized their e-bike more than 4 times a week. 3 folks indicated that they used their bike 1 to 3 times a week, and 2 folks indicated that they used their bike 2 times, or every 2 weeks. The primary uses that we saw indicated were recreation, running errands, and commuting. And you'll see by the numbers that most people are using their bike in a dual purpose situation. It's not one or the other, that this opportunity for folks that are perhaps on low income to have one bike that serves all of their purposes is really reflected in the data that we got back. We also asked them their anticipated use over the winter. And what we heard back was that 1 person suspected daily, so would be kind of a commuter, 6, 1 to 3 times a week, 4 people occasionally, and 4 also indicated that they didn't plan on using their bike. We did also ask a little bit about your accessories and how you'd bought that. We did hear from some folks that they kind of wished they had bought some winterizing pieces in part of their discount opportunity at the time. And so it does reflect there that the use looks like it's going to be significantly less at this point over the winter. We also wanted to know just how does this bike or this program impacted your life? And it was really heartwarming, honestly, to hear some of the responses. Affordability certainly showed up, saying they wouldn't have been able to afford a bike if it hadn't been for this program. And there was a lot of gratitude and appreciation expressed to the town of Canmore for providing this opportunity for them. We also saw, a lot around reduction of frustration, reduction of stress in terms of being able to use this as a transportation option, that they weren't having to deal with traffic congestion, that the parking ability and ease of parking, that being able to leave work and hit a gravel trail on their way home, peace of mind, just that mental wellness. We saw a lot of that. Also heard a lot of comments around sort of the convenience of it, both of getting to work, but also that convenience of navigating and the confidence that we heard some folks talking about, that I feel confident to be a bike commuter and I wasn't sure I was ever going to, and that somehow having an e-bike instills a different level of confidence if you got into a sticky situation than being on your regular pedal bike. So that was interesting to hear as well. We also heard a lot about joy, just that they're fun to ride, that it's fun, that it's brought joy and enjoyment, both in the dual opportunities of use, but just in riding it. And then obviously the dual purpose and this idea of alternate transportation. We did have one response that really struck all of us, that it hit on all of the marks. And so I'm going to read that one response to you. This participant said, having this e-bike has been life-changing. My car recently broke, which sucks, but having my e-bike has made it possible for me to be vehicle-free in Canmore. I live in Stewart Creek and I work 2 jobs, office hours and evening and weekends until late at night after the bus stops running. Without my e-bike, I would not have a way to get home from my job unless I paid for a cab, which would really add up. Without my e-bike, I wouldn't be able to make it from my first job to my second job in time, as the bus does not come frequently enough. Without the e-bike discount program, I wouldn't be able to afford to buy a mountain bike, little own an e-bike hardtail. Thanks to this program, I found a new hobby and a fun way to exercise. Commuting to work with my bike takes away the stress of trying to find nearby parking or the financial stress of paying for parking. If I did not have an e-bike, I would not likely want to bike commute, since I live on the top of a large hill and I'm quite tired after work. Having the option to use the power of the e-bike to get up the hill at the end of the day has made commuting accessible for me. Thanks for all the incredible things you do. So thankful. So our next steps, and these steps have actually started with the first message having gone out to all of affordable services, but also specifically to the e-bike recipients, is really to encourage participation in the Community Cruisers Bike All Winter program that will support, hopefully, an increase in the use for these 25 folks that we have invested this program dollars into to help make this more of a year-round transportation solution. I'll have Amy, if you want to join me. If you have any questions, Amy and I would be happy to answer.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm looking to Community Hall, Councillor Mara.
Thank you, and thank you for this program. I'm just curious, when you said allowed somebody to buy a certain type of bike, is there a certain bike that you require them to buy? And do they have to buy new?
No. So you were the bike shop connection. I think it was one of the bike shops for sure had used. And so we wanted people to have a certain level of battery. Like some of the things you can buy on Amazon, the batteries heat up, they're dangerous, there's problematic. And so in order to have longevity, that the bike wasn't ruined in 8 months, we did encourage people to buy a level of bike that was reasonable, but we did not put stipulations on the kind of bike. And we were working with the bike shops who did, if they had used, allow the purchase of used bikes.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious because I know a few companies around that sell their rentals every year, so they're only...
We did that. Yes,
yeah, okay,
absolutely.
So, okay.
Yeah, and it was lovely. All of the bike shops, just so you guys are aware, all of them participated, and all of them offered additional incentives and supports. They added in a 20% discount on accessories, or on a certain kind of bike, an additional discount. Every single one of them showed up with additional supports to the recipients.
Thank you.
Excellent. Before going to the next question, I wonder if we could move off of the presentation screen, please.
Should we just shut it down?
We can just unplug me.
Oh, yeah.
Does that work?
No.
No.
We're unplugged now.
Okay.
New technology.
While that's being worked on, I'll move to Councillor Graham. You have a question.
Thank you all for putting this program together as a first pilot, and I think we've proven it's been a success to date so far. I was curious about the 4 people that weren't going to use their bike. That was a strange answer to me.
In the winter?
Was that it? In the winter?
There was 4 people who
Thank
mentioned
you.
not using it in the winter at all.
I was like, that is a really strange answer. My brain's not fully here today, but thank you. And then any requirements around how long they have to keep these bikes?
So we drafted an agreement that essentially said you couldn't resell your...
Beautiful.
2 years?
Yeah, it's 2 years.
2 years. And there was a number of other sort of stipulations listed in that agreement that was part of our program design. When we had communications engineering and all of us at the table, it was kind of, here's the things we want to make sure as best we can, and we had people sign copies of that. We have, and so if that comes back to us, I don't know that we have necessarily a lot of legal ease, but what we did was ask folks to make a gentleman's agreement essentially, or that's probably not political. An agreement, a handshake agreement.
Yeah, no, as long as people are keeping bikes and using them, fantastic. I was having a hard time doing the math in my head about how many vehicle trips we took off the road so far with this. We got an estimate on that
We
one?
only have the data right now of 15 of the 25 people.
Right.
So if we were to use that same proportion, I didn't do the math on that, but I could certainly get back to you with what the math on that was.
Something tells me the return on that investment was fairly significant.
Yes.
For us to put $50,000 in to remove what I think is a significant number of vehicle trips.
Yeah.
We don't get that much bang for our buck in other investments. So thank you all very much.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to that the research does say that it's about 10% of total vehicle kilometers traveled. In other programs for e-bike use, they've attributed to that. So that's what we've been doing to do some estimates about that. But for us locally, I think that's total vehicle kilometers traveled. So there's a lot of trips that aren't appropriate for an e-bike, but the ones we care about in reducing congestion and our local air quality are the short ones within Canmore. So that's where we're seeing the reductions for sure. So it might not be as many vehicle kilometers traveled, but they're actual trip numbers, to your point,
Right.
of these shorter trips.
Yeah, I think about my own e-bike usage. We have 3 now, and the number of it's way easier to get to Safeway on my e-bike than it is to drive through downtown. And I think a lot of the feedback that we got, a lot of that resonated with me for sure. So thank you all very much.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for running the program. It's I love the fact that there was a drive to keep it local, support the bike shops. I think, Ms. Fournier, you mentioned that we're reducing trips, which is also a reduction in traffic congestion, which is huge. And then Tara, I think that story you talked about, that one person, was really, really helpful. A family friend, they were one of the last people to get off the wait list and get a bike, and I know it definitely changed her life. And yeah, really great work. Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you for your presentation. I was curious how many of the families that received a bicycle had accessories that were akin to hauling children, that were more like a family vehicle than they were a single vehicle.
There was 2 cargo bikes,
That's great.
and then I think there was only a couple additional that had children-related cargo.
Yeah. Kid hauling equipment. Thank you. That's what I was curious of. Awesome.
Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert, and thank both of you for your presentation. The work that went into creating this program would have been more than perhaps a simple rebate where you apply and you get the money. Does investing that work at the beginning then mean that if we continue this program, you won't need to put as much administrative time into it now that it's set up?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think in our debrief, there was very few design or sort of process changes that we would make, that it ran relatively smoothly, and that front-end investment wouldn't be there. We would be able to kind of pull it out and rinse and repeat.
Yeah, because there's a lot more to achieving the objectives of affordability, as well as just as an e-bike incentive that went into creating the program. I really, I think, for example, getting the local bike shops on board, like an incredibly powerful move that reduces the need for the applicants in the program to put the money up front, fill out paperwork. So that kind of work really carries into the future.
Well, and we're hearing anecdotally that they have a relationship with a bike shop too. So if they don't know or something goes wrong, they go back to where they purchased and have that local support.
Oh, I don't even know how to put my chain back on. They are very helpful. They listen to me and they don't make fun of me. It's really nice. I was wondering if this program continued into the future, would it be possible for people who have used the program to sell their bike back into the program?
We've never discussed that, but I think if it was a viable option, if that was something people wanted to do, or if we could figure out a way to do it.
Oh, yeah, it just
Yeah.
came up out of my colleague's question, and it raised a thing for me. I just want to say I really like this program. It can be really hard, like bike culture in Canmore can be really hard, right? If you got a lot of money, you can have 6 bikes. A bike for everything. A bike with different tires for a different time of year. I don't know. I don't know how people have so many bikes sometimes. I have one bike, and it's an e-bike, and it was an incredible investment in myself, similar to what I see as this program as an investment into our community as well. And I'm really grateful that we've successfully directed this program to target people on the Affordable Services Program, because that's a population of people who are the farthest away from achieving this kind of outcome, and it can be a life-changing purchase, even though it's a bike. I've talked to some people over the summer recently around, like, everyone wants to talk about how people get around, especially in a tourism town. And there are some people who really truly believe that you need a car. And you have to have a car. Even if you have a bike, you still have to have a car. And this program reminds me of my grandmother, who lived in this town for over 50 years without a driver's license or a car. And her and I got around on our bikes. So it's totally possible, and we're leading the way. Thank you.
Just a follow-up. For those who have been successful in the lottery this year, in order to ensure that if it were to go ahead in the future, that it spreads the benefit around, would they be prevented from being able to enter a lottery again? Okay.
One prize per household.
Yeah. Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Just a couple follow-ups. What would we do if we move this program ahead in the future to make it more efficient and get more bikes under people?
More money.
Other than just more money. More money's always the
I
answer.
think the one thing we did feel in the end that there was potential for basing our original research assessment on $2,500 versus $3,500 as the base quality bike, and then applying the 67% to that would increase it by, a little bit, as it would to the tier 2. That we did find that there was some bikes available through local bike shops at that price point that kind of hit all of that longevity and kind of quality that we were hoping for. So I think that would be the one thing, is we would be able to change the base amount.
Right. I just did a quick search on like the average e-bike cost globally, like $2,000. I think I spent $1,000 on each of mine. They were all used.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And seeing no other questions, I just want to thank you for your work on this pilot, and we'll, of course, determine at budget time whether we can move forward with that. I can just say from my own personal experience, a few years ago, I was fortunate enough to be in a position to buy an e-bike, and I really resonated with a lot of those feelings that people had because of their e-bike, and my family has actually been able to go down to one car because I'm able to get to work between transit and my bike, and leaves the vehicle available for my wife, who's not able to ride a bike for physical reasons. So Very, very, very good program benefiting 25 households, and we'll see what we can do in the future.
Thank you so much.
All right, well now, how are we doing with our presentation?
It's accurate online. It just got stuck in the room for some reason.
Yeah, I just like to be able to see it so I know what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is good online. We just need to now turn the projectors back on, so
Okay.
it'll take a minute, and then,
Okay,
there we
great.
go. They're coming.
Okay, all right, we'll move to item D3, Wellhead Protection Planning Update. Mr. Kinsey, welcome to Committee of the Whole.
This looks like it's gonna, I know, we can't do anything about it. It's coming, it comes when it's ready. It looks like it might project, it'll be what it'll be. It might project right onto the wall.
Here it comes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Kinsey. I'm the municipal engineer of the town. And I'm here today to present to you the results of studies completed on the wellhead protection planning. I'm joined by Soren Pushman, who's a hydrogeologist with ISL Engineering, who provided project management services on the project. Today, we'll present the results of the work performed by our hydrogeology consultant, Hatfield Consultants, on this project. So Canmore has two sources of water supply for our potable water system. We have surface water taken from the Rundle Forebay up by the Nordic Centre. That's drawn from pump house number 2, or as you are likely familiar, we're currently building a new water treatment facility, which will be called water treatment plant number 2. The other source of water is from pump house number 1, which is near Elevation Place, if you're familiar with the where the cell phone towers are across Railway Ave from Elevation Place. There we have 2 groundwater wells where we draw water for the rest of the community. The goal of this project is to ensure that we have a sustainable long-term supply of clean drinking water from this water supply. And this study is particularly important because of certain characteristics of the aquifer which render it relatively vulnerable to contamination, which Soren will explain in more detail when he gets into the technical slides. So a little bit of history. In 1999, the town of Canmore established a wellhead protection area. This was relatively early compared to other municipalities and quite progressive. So that created regulations within the land use bylaw, which restricted certain land uses within the wellhead protection area. In 2014, a new well was installed at pump house number 1 at a deeper depth in response to detected contamination at the wellhead. In 2016, the municipal development plan recommended updating the 1999 wellhead protection area. And in 2022, council approved capital project 7258, which was to perform studies and review the wellhead protection area. In addition to this, in 2024, the Climate Emergency Action Plan also identified an update to the study as an important step. So with this, I'm going to hand it off to Soren, who's going to walk you through some slides related to the aquifer itself, contaminant pathways, and some of the more technical aspects.
All right, thanks, Brian. So yeah, as Brian mentioned, there's a couple characteristics about the aquifer the town uses for drinking water. And the aquifer is the geological formation itself through which you're pumping groundwater. So the aquifer itself is the sands and gravels deposited by the ancient Bow River as it kind of meandered back and forth across the valley bottom over the last few thousand years. It is relatively shallow. While your wells are at about 40 and 60 meters depth, the top of the aquifer itself is only a few meters deep. It's unconfined, and what that means is there's either no or a thin layer of impermeable material on top of it. So that's the silts, the clays that'll stop water from quickly moving down into the aquifer. There are spots in the valley bottom where it is present, but on the whole, it's generally not really there. It's relatively fast in terms of when water gets into it, how quickly it moves. In the groundwater world, like meters per year is fast to us, but this one is faster than that. Another unique thing is the stormwater system in the valley bottom consists of dry wells, so stormwater goes into these dry wells, which then goes into the aquifer. So these characteristics do make it particularly vulnerable to contamination. So some of the common contaminants we see in the urban environment that can impact aquifers. So as I mentioned, stormwater runoff, that can pick up motor oils, pesticides. If there's any spills that get into the stormwater system, it'll quickly make its way into the aquifer. Hazardous waste in industrial areas and leaking fuel storage tanks and gas stations are also pretty common sources of contaminants. So when we talk about a wellhead protection area, what it actually is the area around a well that contributes source water to a drinking water system. So it's an area at surface through which if a particle, a droplet of water were to hit the ground, make its way down, it'll get into the aquifer. So the time of travel is another key concept. You can see that in the vertical lines here. So when a droplet of water hits further away from the wells, it'll take longer to get to the well than if it's closer. So it's essentially how fast water will get there. Of course, the aquifer is unconfined, so there's no confining layer to slow it down. And really the intent of defining a wellhead protection area is to protect drinking water from contamination. So as Brian mentioned, there was a wellhead, or is a wellhead protection area in place that was developed in 1999. In the last 25 years, obviously we've had quite a few advances in the techniques to define this. So it was done with the science at the time, which is a bit outdated. But really the key concepts are it used a well that's since been replaced by a deeper well. And also it used pumping rates which were accurate at the time. So obviously with the town growth, you're pumping more water out and that impacts how quickly water travels to the well. There's also about 20 years of monitoring data that the town's collected now that we used to calibrate the model. And the land use and potential sources of contamination around the wells has also changed. So the 2023 model update, as I mentioned, it included that deeper well, higher pumping rates, it used the data for calibration, and also modern 3D groundwater modeling techniques. You can see here in this image, that's the time of travel. So closer to the well is orange and red, that's 1 week, 1 day. Further away, 1 year, and the green is 5 years. So here's the wellhead protection area. In gray is the 1999 one. The blue one is the proposed revision to the wellhead protection area, which does correspond a bit coincidentally to the 5-year capture zone. Overall, the shape and extent is fairly similar. They both generally follow river flow, but it is larger because of that deeper well and the higher pumping rates. You can see in the southwest there, the kind of jagged line, we did expand it to incorporate property boundaries, so we didn't have a line just going right through the middle of a property. And within this, the time of travel estimates really just give context to the risks, right? So if a spill happens closer to the wells, it'll get there quicker. If it's further away, you have more time to identify and remediate the contamination. So yeah, this area captures commercial, residential, industrial areas, as well as the rail line. And your wells being deeper does give some protection from contaminants, but they are still vulnerable to contamination from the surface, which is what this wellhead protection area represents. I'll pass it back to Brian.
So this slide presents a number of next steps that administration is considering as a result of the studies. So some of these next steps are developed using recommendations from the consultant, and others are our own administrative assessment of activities that would be required. And we've broken these into short-term and intermediate-term activities. So under short-term, the first is conducting a contaminant inventory. So this would look at individual properties within the wellhead protection area that could be potential sources of contamination. This is essentially a desktop study that's going to look at uses like gas stations, dry cleaners, properties where you might see high applications of pesticides or herbicides, industrial uses, sites generating hazardous wastes. The next step would be consultation. So we would design and implement a consultation process with the affected parties. We'd also require a land use bylaw update to modify the wellhead protection area boundary, and also to update the list of uses in the wellhead protection area if necessary. Another step that we're considering is an update to the EDCG, which would look at certain criteria for mitigations and improve stormwater management. So an example of this might be if you're building a building using pilings within the wellhead protection area, what type of mitigations are we looking for to make sure you're not creating pathways into the aquifer? The next bullet point, spill response planning. So protective services, they have robust spill response planning protocols in place already. The intent here would be to work with them to sensitize them to the vulnerability of the aquifer because of the nature of stormwater management in the valley bottom, and work with them to ensure that that's being considered in their response. Stormwater master plan. So the town has a 2005 stormwater master plan. We're bringing forward in the budget for consideration an update to this plan, and there will be numerous things considered in that plan, but one of those would be looking at how we manage stormwater quality in the valley bottom and see if there are certain techniques or technologies that we could adopt to improve our practices in light of the wellhead. The last of the short-term steps is a very concrete step, and this would be constructing monitoring wells within the wellhead protection area. So Soren has suggested 3 wells would be adequate, drilled to, I believe it's 40 meters depth. And that's to get to a certain layer within the strata. And the intent behind those would be to monitor those on a regular basis. So we would actually draw water and run analytical tests on those to see if we're detecting any contaminants. And the intent there is to provide an early warning system upstream of our wellhead that would alert us to any contaminants that might impact it. In the intermediate term, we have a couple other items that were recommended by the consultant. So one is reviewing railway activities, so both from the perspective of their day-to-day operations and how that might impact the wellhead, but also if there's an incident such as a spill, how the response would happen and what the risks are. And the last of the intermediate term activities would be establishing a mechanism to ensure that there are regular reviews. So, I'm coming to you today, updating our 1999 wellhead protection area. The intent of the regular reviews would be to establish an administrative protocol so that reviews are happening on an established frequency. And we'd also look at who, whether internal and or external parties, would need to be involved in that review process. So that concludes my presentation. Soren and I are available for any questions.
Thank you very much. I had a question. You started off the presentation noting our 2 sources of water. Should we have a contamination in one or the other, do we have sufficient redundancy for at least a limited period of time to maintain water availability to the whole of the town?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. To give you an accurate response, I'd like to go through EPCOR to provide that, but my understanding is we can. We might be limited in our firefighting capabilities because that is kind of the limiting factor in terms of the water network. My understanding is we'd be able to provide potable water at regular service levels to the community in such a case.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Kuzi. I wonder if you could help educate me on why this location was chosen for the wellhead originally. It seems to me you'd want to be upstream of all these things and not downstream of all these things. Why did we choose that location, and does it still make sense?
Unfortunately, I can't comment on the history. I could look around the room if anyone else has the history.
it just ended up there.
I don't know. It's something I could certainly look into. Does it make sense to continue there? I mean, it's where we're established. Be relatively expensive to create a new source.
And we just spent a fair bit of money doing that.
Yeah, and so really the goal of the wildfire protection, because prevention is so much less expensive than cleaning up after an event. So that's the goal here, is to make sure we have steps in place to protect that water source rather than needing to establish a new one.
But it's probably, the likelihood of something happening eventually is pretty high. Something is going to happen, correct? No?
I mean, do you mean like a spill event? Or,
Yeah,
yeah.
there will be a fuel tank or a railway car accident at some point in time through that zone. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
We don't know for certain. We don't know for certain.
Yeah.
Don't know for certain.
Yeah, and this is why we
Is there something you know that we should know?
I'll move on. Yeah. Are we saying that we're not going to have gas stations in that zone anymore?
So part of the next steps is assessing land use within the wellhead protection area and coming up with a plan for properties. So, certainly we'd be looking at restricting zoning within the area. Existing uses would be, and I'm venturing into planning terrain here, so Ms. Smithers can correct me if I'm saying anything correct, but they would be legal non-conforming uses until the time of redevelopment.
Okay.
Ms. Smithers?
Yeah, good answer for engineering. I just wanted to add that the land use bylaw does currently contain restrictions on uses within the existing Wellhead Protection Act, so those are in place now.
Right.
We would just be looking at revising them based on the findings in the recently completed study.
Thank you.
Does the aquifer go like north of town? Is it a lot larger than the wellhead protection area?
You can take that.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's known as the Bow Valley Aquifer. So essentially, in the valley bottom, it extends quite a bit past,
Right.
On either side of the Bow River, and north and south of here as well. The wellhead protection extended to the Bow River, where we interpret that's actually where the water is coming into the aquifer from the river up at that northern spot. So it's not actually kind of going across the flow, it's traveling along the Bow River flow to the wells this way, which is why it kind of extends in that northwest direction. Right. But yeah, the aquifer is kind of widespread, so sure, moving wells around is possible for the aquifer, but there's a lot of complexities on top of money. You get closer to the river, you get pulling directly in river water versus where we are now. There's a bit of lag time there. So, it's a big widespread aquifer.
So if a contamination takes place at a point in the aquifer that is, it would take some time to arrive to the wellhead, where there's that 2 to 5 year range where that, is that something that can be dealt with to eliminate that so that it never actually gets to the wellhead?
It can. It gets tougher as it gets into the aquifer. Like if you know about it and can do something about it quickly and get it out of there. If you think about an oil spill in the ocean, it's kind of similar, right? Like if you get it contained right away, you can absolutely deal with it. If it gets out and gets widespread, it's harder to deal with.
Right.
Obviously, there's dilution and a bunch of other things going on, but if you know about it and can act on it quickly, then yes, you can do something about it, which is why the wellhead protection is kind of a risk identification and mitigation measure. It does buy time to be able to react. And that's the basis of the monitoring well recommendation too. If we establish these wells at those depths, the town can kind of take it in their own hands to monitor and test the water to make sure there's nothing in there coming at the wells.
And so this report identifies an expansion of the area, recognizing a potential hazard. But it's not a given that if there was a train spill or a contamination from a gas station or something, it's not a given that it will make it into the aquifer. It may not, but
No,
we
it
have,
may
we
not.
have to be ready in case it does.
And that's exactly it, right? Like it's a identification measure to know if something does happen, you know, on top of the emergency measures and everything else, getting things contained. You need to be thinking about, okay, is our drinking water source safe with this event?
Thank you. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. One thing I wanted to add for Councillor Graham is the SO on Railway, their gas tanks are above ground. And that's one of the differences in terms of how they're allowed to continue to operate. My question is around, I guess I'm wondering, is this a stormwater management issue or a drinking water issue? And how does EPCOR fit in? Because I thought they had a role to play in some of those things.
Sorry, could you just elaborate on the question? So you've asked if it's a stormwater issue versus a drinking water issue?
Drinking water. And where does EPCOR fit in as our contractor who manages our drinking water?
Yeah. So
And I thought they had a role to play in stormwater. I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, so in terms of EPCOR's role in stormwater management, they're responsible for managing our pipe storm network. But if we're talking about dry wells and culverts, that's under the responsibility of the Streets and Roads Department.
Okay.
And they're responsible for providing clean, safe drinking water for the community. So, you know, they conduct all of the testing at the wellhead that's required under our approval to operate. But there's an interconnection here, of course, because we're in this unique situation where we're conveying surface runoff into the aquifer from which we draw our potable water. There's a connection between those two. And that's a practice that's been happening in Canmore for, you know, from the beginning of development in the valley bottom. We have this unique situation where we manage stormwater in that way.
So has there been contaminants detected from that wellhead?
So in 2014, there were polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that were detected, and that prompted the drilling of a deeper well to avoid that contamination.
Now that we have the deeper well, have we detected any PAHs?
Not to my knowledge. Yeah.
No? Okay.
So
That's the acronym, right? PAH?
PAH, correct,
right?
yeah. Not to my knowledge. There's, through our approval to operate, we're required to sample for those types of constituents on an annual basis.
So we test once a year?
There's other parameters we test on a more regular frequency, but for that type of constituent, it's an annual sampling.
And then, so if I understand the situation, the recommendations out of this report are about protecting that water source from future contaminations, either from development or an incident that occurs somewhere in that area, that it would trickle into that water source.
Or better protecting,
Better
because we
protecting.
already have things in place. This is about expanding, right?
That's a great clarification, yes.
Do we have a idea of how much this might cost in terms of capital and operating budgets?
Yeah, so we're putting together, you know, with the budget process upcoming, there will be some capital and operating asks as part of that. Several of these initiatives would be delivered by administration, and a few would require consulting support. And of course, the monitoring well program would have, you know, construction costs related to the drilling of the wells and coming up with a groundwater response plan. So that there'll be certain projects that you should be seeing as part of the budget process.
So we'll see details of any of those sorts of asks during the budget time.
Correct.
Okay.
And then who monitors it? Would it be us or EPCOR?
That's to be determined as we move forward into the next steps. Yeah. So currently, the engineering department does the monitoring of our piezometer network. So that's looking at groundwater level, and that's solely how high the groundwater is. We don't do any chemical analytics. So we would, of course, this isn't in the EPCOR contract, so if we were to ask them to do that, we'd have to negotiate that. Otherwise, we could consider staff, if we have the staff resources and expertise to perform that work.
And then I know this isn't necessarily a question, but I know that Canadian Pacific will, in a closed session, provide information around the types of materials going through our community, and I would definitely be interested in having that kind of a briefing.
Yeah, and that might be a question best asked of Ms. Miller. My understanding from when we were working on the railway risk project was that protective services can access information on dangerous goods when there is an incident, that they have the ability to access that information in real time. I'm not sure if that's provided to the municipality on a broader statistical level.
My reading of the legislation is that municipal elected officials or councils can request from CP Rail a closed session briefing.
Okay.
Not like from at a political level. We can ask for that information. But maybe the laws have changed since the last time I read them.
Let's keep that idea alive, and we'll have a discussion about that as we're planning future meetings. Any other questions? Okay, so thank you very much. I just want to reiterate that I actually see this, while it's a very serious situation, and obviously drinking water is something that we want to protect. This work is really a good news story, is that we're making improvements. And the fact that the study was done, as we had set out in the 2016 MDP, is laying the groundwork for a better and more comprehensive system going forward, so our current protections are enhanced. And so I appreciate that work being done. It's better to do the preventative work or the planning rather than having to deal with it in retrospect and wish we had done something like this. So, great, so thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a meeting break now until 2:55. Okay, we're back, and we'll now move to agenda item D4, Key Performance Indicators for the Livability Tax Program. Ms. Van Kampima, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Krausard, members of council. I'm saying we because I'm representing a whole bunch of people. So, so we're here to gather your input on key performance indicators that you want tracked and reported on as part of this tax livability program we're putting into place. And this is ahead of codifying it into an amended reserves policy. So today's hey, this is what we're thinking, what are you thinking? And then we'll take that feedback and we'll put it into the formal amended reserves policy and bring that back before year end for you to make a formal decision on which key performance indicators, I'm now shortening it to KPIs, that you would like to see. So to start, to this point, there's been different names and iterations, and to this point, my reports have referred to the program as the Primary Residence Property Tax Program. There's been some confusion or what that meant or impression given as to who was going to be taxed, and it also helps to provide some clarity in the name of something as to what its purpose is. So administration has decided that we'd like to change the name to the Livability Tax Program because it talks to the purpose rather than the action. And then what we will also do in the amended reserves policy, we'll create a livability reserve so that the nomenclature is consistent. So why collect KPIs? KPIs are used to measure your progress towards your goals and objectives, and it makes sure that your program is actively managed. Tracking aspects of the endeavors is essential for improvement and success. The data collected will inform our processes and program improvements, And after a couple of years of initial data gathering, we can use that data to help us set targets and goals. So KPIs, there's two types of KPIs we've put together. We've put together KPIs for gauging the effectiveness of the program. The other one is gauging enforcement. So the ones for gauging effectiveness, predominantly leveraging the online declaration process. Most KPIs in this category will be gathered through that process. And it's to measure the effectiveness in reaching our goals. This includes numbers and locations of primary residences and non-primary residences, owner versus tenant occupancy and how these numbers change over time, the number of dwelling units per property, and the exemptions. And the reason why knowing what the dwelling units are is the program just requires if there's more than one dwelling unit that one of them be occupied full-time. And also it will help us determine if we're increasing the number of units available. So we may not create a whole new standalone building, but we may be adding secondary suites or ADUs to existing properties, and that information will help us determine if that's happening. Other KPIs being collected will be through the development permit process or our assessment and our taxation processes, and those include the program revenue, the tourist home conversions, and the assessed values of the various properties. All of these KPIs, as I said, will be codified in an amended reserves policy coming to a council meeting near you. So KPIs for gauging enforcement. So another aspect of effectiveness is actually leading and influencing others to comply. So the effectiveness of the program depends on it. If you can't get people to comply, your program, you're not going to be meeting your goals and your objectives. So in addition to education, which is a large part of it, which is our communications plan, also is the enforcement mechanism, and that is for influencing behavior. So to measure the effectiveness of our enforcement process and inform improvements in this area, the KPIs gathered will be done manually because the enforcement process is a manual one. There isn't a software program that would allow us, like the online declaration would, to gather it electronically. So the KPIs to be collected by staff logs is the numbers of proactive audits undertaken and the results of them. But we also see that we'll be receiving complaint-based, and we'll have to investigate those. So we'll want to have KPIs around how many were complaint-based investigations and what were the results of those investigations. And by complaint-based, I mean, my neighbors always got different people there, and I know, I went online and I saw that they declared that they lived there, and I know for a fact they don't. That would be a complaint-based. Whereas the audit-based would be, a proactive audit-based is our internal department would choose ones to look into, ask those people to provide documentation to support their declaration, and that would be a proactive as compared to a complaint-based. These particular enforcement KPIs will be codified in a corporate directive, and that's something that's approved by the CAO, and that's how that will be kept knowledge going forward. So what is the next steps? Both sets of KPIs will be reported on annually. So just because the enforcement ones are put down for continuity of knowledge in a corporate directive rather than a policy, that doesn't mean they're not still going to be reported on. So both groups will be reported on annually, but not necessarily at the same time. And the reason for that is much of the program data is available once we're through the declaration process and the assessment and taxation process. So there's sort of a set time. We've got the data. We can come back to council and report. Whereas enforcement is something that happens throughout the year. So we'll just have to find a time and set the cutoff and say, in this past, this is what the reporting is on the enforcement. So that's why they may not come at the same time. In addition, administration will be monitoring the process and the declaration process and gathering input just internally to see if there's some improvements that we can make to that process. So just like we do with any other process, that isn't something that we would formally come to council and report on. But as we always do with all of our programs, we are always making sure that we're monitoring them and keeping track of what our feedback is and seeing how we can make improvements to those processes. So that concludes the presentation on this, and now I'm going to turn it over to you to provide some feedback and ask me any questions that you might have. I'd like to know what you think.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate this report and laying it out for us. And yes, this is an excellent opportunity to provide that feedback because, as was mentioned, what comes of this conversation will very much shape what's coming back as the reserve policy.
Yeah.
Right, great. So opening it up, looking to Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I see that we're tracking average values.
Mm-hmm.
Are we tracking average rent?
We certainly can, yeah.
Okay. And I think we're tracking this, but I'm not certain. What about rental vacancy rate?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so I'm just wanting to explore that a little bit. Can you speak to both of those as to what's the information that it would provide us with respect to our livability tax program? I can see with rental amounts, maybe we're getting a sense on market there, but I wasn't sure what the others might achieve.
Well, average value, we'll see how we're affecting values in town. Average rents, we'll see what the rate of increase on rent is and how that is affecting affordability in town.
Won't that be on a wider sense, though, as opposed to this small demographic?
Yes.
Okay.
But I believe that if we're bringing inventory on and we're seeing rents still increase at a rapid rate, then maybe we need to use increased tools. If we see vacancy rates staying at 0%,
Okay,
or
I see,
if they're hitting 10%, then we know that we've ratcheted things up too far or not enough.
So when somebody has, they complete the residential, or the form to get the lower tax rate as a primary resident, if they're renting, that information could be asked for?
Could be, yes.
Okay. All right.
I think that's maybe problematic to ask them what their rent is.
Yeah,
There's a
that's
freedom of
what-
information
that's
clause
what
with
that's
that.
what I'm wondering.
But we could monitor, CCH, for example, monitors
Yes.
average rent from
Yes.
various sites, and we could be monitoring that information at the same time
to make sure that we're encouraging compliance as opposed to putting up
Barriers,
roadblocks.
right.
Dr. Cottle.
I do think it's important to distinguish the purpose of this program is to create inventory. It's not to increase affordability. That may or may not be a byproduct, but council may have remembered there was recently a study about similar projects like this in other communities, and it did not affect affordability. It just created more inventory. So we could collect that data. We're already collecting it in our OKRs, but it will be really difficult to link it to this particular program, and it's not an expressed intent of the program. So.
Well, and I liken it to, that study showed it didn't change rates. If you took it to a great extreme and the market was flooded and there was actually a large vacancy rate, then that program could lead to a reduction in rent. But I liken it to almost with, and you're not going to like this, Councillor Graham, but if you like it to the photo radar. In the moment, there could be arguments either way as to whether it creates greater safety.
Right.
Some would argue yes, because people know it's there. Some would argue no, because they're not being stopped in the moment by a real person. But what I think you can't argue with is that the proceeds from that program have enhanced safety because they've, in fact, made changes to roadways that now no longer need the photo radar because the calming measures are in place. Similarly, this program, we hope, will increase some residential units. And if it doesn't, we certainly hope that affordability will be impacted by the funds gathered for the reserve, being able to create more non-market housing, deal with infrastructure that would support that housing, purchase land, etc. So I think that there is, I think there is an affordability, but it may not be exactly shown up in the rents. But yeah, anyway, Those are my comments.
Thank you. I think those are all fair comments. I appreciate that.
Did you have any other comments or questions?
Not at this time, sir. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Kempima, for your presentation. I think a lot of this is really great. With the enforcement side, I'm assuming enforcement will happen continuously through the year?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be possible to add a KPI for repeat offenders? I'd like to understand if like our deterrents are working across the board, or if there's some people that are just like continually flaunting what we're trying to do. I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions on these proposed KPIs? Of course, we'll learn over time too what's good and what other things might come forward. I like these. I can advise, during agenda review, there was more of them, and some of the feedback was getting to really down to the main ones that we want to do, and I think a really good job was done at narrowing down. I think that this is a good mix, because you also don't want 30 of them, right?
Well, and then nobody pays attention to them.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, any other comments, questions? I think that's it. Thank you very much. And now, I take you're going to stay right there for item D5, criteria for the use of funds generated under the Livability Tax Program. Ms. Van Kampima, you're back.
Imagine that. Look at that. It's been so long. All right, again.
That would be incredible. Like, you know those quick change artists? If you had a totally different outfit. It's just
on
like,
America's Got Talent, did you see that lady?
Exactly.
She just flips a paper and she's a whole different outfit.
Exactly.
Not
There you
me.
go.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, so the wee thing again, we're here to get your input on the criteria for using the funds that will be collected under the Livability Tax Program, and this would also be codified in the reserves policy that would come back. So there's lots of different parts and pieces that will show up written in the reserve policy or a tax policy in all of this work that's happening. So this one will show up in the reserves. All right, so why? Why would we establish some criteria? So the funds collected under the program are intended to be used for non-market housing initiatives. While the KPIs we just discussed aid in determining and monitoring the program, its effectiveness, being clear on what the money is going to be used for from the outset will make sure that the initiatives are actually advancing your objectives. That the program money is being used for its intended purpose, and for accountability and consistency is important as well. Including criteria in the reserves policy ensures that there's the continued knowledge and understanding of what the intentions were at the outset for the program. If you don't write it down somewhere that's a continuing document, it's sometimes hard. You don't necessarily retain that knowledge years from now. So how? How did we come up with the criteria we have before you for consideration today? The Livability Task Force provided some recommendations, and we also looked at programs for other municipalities. So you've seen the Livability Task Force recommendations. The other ones were from Vancouver, Toronto, and Ottawa that we looked at to see what they were doing with their money. Vancouver has a number of initiatives, which makes sense. Their program has been in place longer. They have something called the Community Housing Initiative Program, and it's grants that they give to nonprofit organizations that provide housing. They also use some of their funds for land acquisitions as well as the development of land for affordable housing. The staff support costs, so there's initiatives and programs, then they sometimes will need administrative staff to run that program or support the program, so there's costs involved in that, as well as they have a pool of money that's available for any emerging priorities at the time. Toronto being a newer project, they have something called the Multi-Unit Residential Acquisition Program, and it's funding to nonprofits, and it's geared towards preserving their current rental stock and being available to convert privately held rental stock into nonprofit held rental stock. And then Ottawa is the newest yet, and they basically in their statement have a general affordable housing initiatives, but when you dig a little bit further, you can see that it's tied to their housing action plan, which is focused on capital funding for construction of affordable units. So in addition, we looked at the town's existing programs or past programs, such as Vital Homes, Affordable Services Program, land acquisitions, accessory suite incentives, and recently the tax incentive for purpose-built rental housing. So taking all of that information together, we put together a recommendation of 8 areas or criteria that can be considered. We can take some away, we can add some more in. This is an opportunity, but it's also not a one and done. When we come back with the amended policy, if you've thought of more in the meantime, we can certainly have that discussion then. So we're looking at increasing our purpose-built rental development, increasing non-market housing, because non-market housing is not necessarily rental, just rental housing. We want to make sure that, as Mayor Krauser had mentioned, that it can fund the supporting infrastructure to get those housing units in place. They're not really great houses to live in if they don't have water and wastewater and things like that. Funding affordability programs, incentivizing accessory suites. We might want to re-energize some sort of program along those lines. We can follow the lead of the other municipalities and provide grants to nonprofit housing providers, fund program administrative costs, as well as preserve the existing affordable rental housing. So sort of along the lines of Toronto's idea where they're focused on preservation. They must have a number that are turning over into private hands and stop becoming affordable. So, and being condominiumized. So those are the 8 sort of criteria. So what are the next steps? We need to amend the reserves policy. And when we do the amendment to the reserves policy, that will cause the creation of a livability reserve. So in the livability reserve, in the reserve policy, it will say how does the reserve get funded, how do you spend money out of the reserve, and so that's where all of these things will live. And we will also make sure that that is where your KPIs will live. How do you measure, how do you report back on this particular reserve? So once we have your feedback, I can put together that report and bring it to you for consideration. And back to the same slide as before, what do you think?
There you go. Excellent, thank you very much. Looking for feedback from members of the committee of the whole. Councillor Faubert.
I had a question around preserving existing rental housing. What does that mean? Would it include subsidizing rent, or are we talking repair and maintenance, or even upgrades to include energy efficiency initiatives?
So that would be something that council would have to decide, because whenever there's an initiative that we're going to be spending money out of a reserve, council actually has to approve that. So then at that time, you would decide, does that meet the criteria or the things that you're wanting to do? These sort of criteria or areas were set a little bit more broadly because somebody might come up with something that we didn't think of. So when we're talking about preserving existable affordable housing, then you would decide, well, funding renovations, is that the thing we want to do? Or maybe we don't. So just because something falls in with the criteria that's set here does not mean it automatically gets funding.
Okay, because I felt that there may be models where the rents being charged, like by CCH, includes money to go into reserves for capital replacements of things, which to me would mean that we're already financially planning for some of the preservation of our existing rental housing. So I wasn't sure if this was an area that we would see much action in. Yeah.
Councillor McCallum.
Sorry. So examples of that, when I saw that in the report, what I automatically went to was existing buildings that are in the private market that are rental and perhaps older, and the purchase of those buildings to re-rent. So they aren't reliant on, you know, a 4 or 6% or 8% ROI. They are being operated then as non-market apartment rental. That's how I've seen those funds being used in other areas of the country in the past. That's how I saw it.
So just a follow-up question, and I think there might be just, and I might have just missed it, but I just didn't see a section that described the preserving existing affordable rental housing. I see it in the list. I didn't see it up above. And so that would be something that would obviously, when this comes back, would need to be expanded out on to give some examples so that there's...
Did you want examples in that?
Pardon me?
Did you want examples brought, or do you want to leave it more broad?
Or at least some sort of, so we don't have, every council doesn't have this discussion going forward. There's one meeting one thing and the other's seeing something else. So just a little bit clarity there. That'd be great. Councillor McCallum?
So it's not an exhaustive list, it's just like IE, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, it
Exactly.
could be different or more expanded,
Yeah.
but it gives people an idea of what's
Yeah.
running through our
But it's,
brain
as
matter.
opposed to, it's not a, it's about what you
Yeah, yeah, for
described,
sure.
and as
And
opposed to
about-
not to replace a capital reserve fund that is already supposed to be collected.
Right, yeah, no, it's,
Yeah.
you want to provide a bit of clarity for the reader, for sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Graham?
And then I think, kind of along those similar lines, the supporting infrastructure, some examples of what that might be. Are we talking pipes and sewer lines? Are we talking pedestrian overpasses? Are we talking about, I don't know what we're talking about. That seemed fairly open-ended to me at that point in time as well.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about supporting infrastructure, it depends if it is infrastructure that's related to growth, because then your offsite levies may come into play if it's something that is under the offsite levy bylaw.
Right.
But I'm also thinking of situations where there's already existing infrastructure there, and maybe it's the town who's developing the units. So it's not a developer. Would we charge ourselves the offsite levies but we'd have to upsize the pipes, because right now there's a duplex on the property and now we're going to put in a 8-plex. So you'd have to upsize the pipes. In that situation, then you might need a separate source of funding from offsite levies.
Ms. Smithers, you wanted to add?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like we're getting pretty narrowed in on a conversation that is really about setting some goalposts. So as I see it, this point would be acknowledging that housing, non-market, affordable market, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It requires utility connections, it requires sidewalks, it requires, especially when we're looking at our mode shift bike infrastructure, it requires viable transit networks, pedestrian connectivity, all those things. And to me, this guideline is really looking for confirmation from council of, would that be an acceptable use of the funds that would be generated here? So I just wanted to kind of lift it up a little bit.
Thank you, Ms.
I
Smithers.
appreciate that, and what I'm hearing from Councillor Graham is maybe we need a sense of what sort of infrastructure we're talking about in order to determine whether it's acceptable.
Yeah, and that's a good takeaway. So I think if we were to develop this further, we could certainly include some of those parameters, because as was acknowledged, infrastructure funding can become pretty complicated pretty easily. So I think we would want to have some clear direction around that going forward.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, looking to see if there's any other questions or comments. I don't see any, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now you're just going to have to give up the mic. Because item D6 is communications big stories launch. Mr. Robertson, and I see your team is here as well.
The whole team is here.
Yeah.
Is this frozen again?
So I just wanted to note, of course, you probably know this, but we're not getting anything to our screens now, right? Okay. No, but even before that, there was nothing.
made a really nice presentation. What's that? A dance. We didn't do a dance.
We'll just take a few minutes, so why don't you relax for a few minutes? It's 3:22. Let's come back at 3:25 or as soon as we see the screens down, whichever is earlier. For your patience, Mr. Robertson. Anytime you're ready.
So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon with my colleagues and the whole communications team, Caroline Hayden, Nikki Pakis. And we're super excited to be here this afternoon and share some of the work that we've been doing and to launch a new initiative, which is right there, Meet Our Big Stories. But before we get into that, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. So our community and organization continue to change, and we're evolving to meet those changing needs. Our previous approaches featured numerous standalone campaigns for individual services, projects, and programs. And as Ms. Van Campina was just presenting, actually one of the photos in hers, the Livable Canmore background, that brought me back like 7, 8 years ago. I think Dr. Cottle and I worked on that one together. That was super interesting. But it kind of highlights what we're here to talk about. So this approach can inadvertently make it difficult for the public to see the connections between various projects and how they collectively advance your priorities. So as we look for ways to evolve, we look at industry best practices, and most importantly, we look to the community to see how they want to hear communications from the town. So we made a new strategic plan. And I'm sure it would be super exciting to hear all about that, but I won't go into too many details. But there are a few things that we want to highlight for you, because we're really excited about them. So really it's our goals, and it has 4 main goals, which you can see on the screen. And not that I want to read them, but each goal has a statement that goes along with it, which I think is really important. So encourage a well-informed community, deliver timely, accurate, clear, and responsive information in ways that's preferred by our residents. Foster two-way communication, engage in meaningful dialogue, maximizing opportunities for community feedback, and using it to enhance programs and services. Positively shape the public perception of the town of Canmore, so highlight successes, acknowledge challenges, and involve the community in our progress. And we want to reflect the community in our work, so we'll use community-centric approaches to address the diverse needs, perspectives, and demographics of our residents. And we also addressed or developed a series of guiding principles. Again, they're on the screen there. We think they really speak to who we are as an organization, reflect your goals, and truly reflect the spirit of the community. And again, each one of these has a statement that goes with it, and I'm not going to read all 8 of them, but I wanted to focus in on a few that I think really resonate with myself. So clarity. We translate complex information so that it's easy to understand. Creativity. We're not boring, and we'll push ourselves to make exciting communications materials. Relatable. We speak to residents like we are residents. And responsive. Citizens want to be heard. We support opportunities to provide their input and acknowledge their feedback. So some of the things that we've up to, or that we have been up to over the past year that you'll have seen in the community, it's a number of tactics we've been trying. Some are new, some aren't new. But we created the Community Emergency Preparedness Guide, and Ms. Pack has put a lot of work into that, and very well received in the community, and that's something different than we've done before. There's a number of photos up there, but we had the warm-up and cool-down events, which paired live music and community programming with public engagement, which were hugely successful. Then we have Mayor Krausert riding your bike through the ribbon that the kids were holding at the Party on the Path to celebrate the opening of a big community project that we need to celebrate, and we've seen huge success with. We have a photo of a shared RMO programming ad, which has been a change for us, but 3 times a year we do combined programming for all of the programs and services the town offers. We started putting a big spread in the newspaper, and we've seen upticks in registration. On the far side of the screen there, we have a shot of a new newsletter online tool we launched, which you can directly subscribe to on the website. And newsletter is the, email, but email newsletter is the #1 way residents told us in the 2023 Citizen Perspective Survey that they want to hear from us. And coming soon, we have a new Instagram account that we look forward to launching very soon. And so I think it's important to say we're not always going to get it right, but we've tried a lot of different things, and we look forward to continuing a lot of different things. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hayden, who's going to talk about the big stories that we're here to launch.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We are really excited to...
Ms. Hayden, just thank you, welcome. If you could just bring the microphone down a little bit. There you go.
How's this? Okay, testing. Well, hello again. We're very excited to be here to share yet another tactic stemming from our strategic plan that officially launches today. It's called Our Big Stories. And it is a new storytelling approach to share the key town of Canmore work with the community. So as you know, each term, council sets priorities that reflect the values of our community and in turn direct the work of our organization and create a suite of projects that cross our departments. And as Adam mentioned, our approach in the past with communications is to really treat each of those subsequent projects and initiatives and events as their own standalone universe. And for us, within the organization and for you as council, we understand how those projects are working to advance the goals of council and our organization. But for the public, they're not necessarily keeping track of all the complexities and interconnected nature of our work. So, to communicate that breadth of great work to advance council's priorities, we are trying something new called Big Stories. And how it will work is we will highlight 6 major themes every year that reflect some of the key projects that we're working on that make Canmore a better place to call home. So how it will work is every year we will identify those 6 major themes. Each of them will get their own icon. You'll see this here's on the screen right now, and a tagline. And then underneath each of those themes, we will bucket our major projects, events, and initiatives that relate to advancing that theme. So then when we go out to the public to either invite them to engage with us or participate in something or to inform them about some of the key projects happening in our community, instead of focusing just on that individual project, we're shifting our approach to helping people understand how it applies to the big picture. And this is what it will look like. So our Big Stories has a standalone brand identity that sits underneath the Town of Canmore brand. And this look and feel with the big, bold colors, the focus on landscape imagery will stay consistent year to year, but the stories that we're going to tell within this framework will change as our priorities as an organization shift, along with the individual icons that you'll see there. So we really wanted this campaign to cut through the noise of all of the different ads and campaigns that we've had in the past and that the community will see out and about around town, which is why we went with an approach that's really big and bold and still speaks to the town of Canmore, but feels new and fresh and modern, so we can bring a new audience into the story of what is the town of Canmore and really clearly convey how specific projects are aligning and advancing council's priorities. So for our inaugural year of the Big Stories program for 2024 and then carrying through 2025, these are our key themes that we've identified for this year. And I'm hoping these will land with you in alignment with your priorities and some of the major work that has already been coming before you. So our first one being human-wildlife coexistence, and these icons a little bit hard to see, it's a little bit small, but the icon is a little elk. And we are making our community safer for humans and wildlife, such as our fruit tree removal initiative, which still has funds available. And we are also planning for a vibrant downtown with our Connect Downtown project that just had 2 rounds of engagement this past year, with 2 additional rounds happening in 2025, and the final plan coming before council. And as we just heard, we are taking action to address the housing crisis, such as supporting affordable housing and incentivizing full-time, long-term occupancy of homes. We're also working to protect our community from hazards. So some of our highlight work for the upcoming year is ongoing planning for a community fire guard and the upcoming completion of the Cougar Creek Dry Dam, which is very exciting. We're also making it easier to get around Canmore over the long term. So this has been a major priority for us for a number of years, and you can see that happening right now with the ongoing work to extend the separated pathway on Bow Valley Trail and the recent completion of the West Bow Valley Trail. And finally, we want the community to feel seen in the programs and services that we offer as a community, so stay tuned for some upcoming engagement related to that this year. So throughout this next year, you should expect to see, and the community should expect to see, progress and updates related to these key themes that will roll out throughout this campaign. And to give you a sense of what this will look like, these are some of the elements that will be going out into the community within the weeks to come related to one of our key stories being the human-wildlife coexistence story. And you can expect to see some similar elements rolling out for each of those key story areas. Number one being really consistent messaging. So we've taken an approach with this campaign where we are speaking as residents to residents. So it's a very direct, it's using very simple language, and it's really it's cutting through the complexity and inviting people to really clearly understand those key projects within the town of Canmore. We'll be rolling out information on social media using some of these big, bold designs. And whenever we talk about a given project, we'll be linking the related icon so people can start to learn when they see a specific icon, it's related to a specific project. We have some signage going out, including our big wooden frame signs in the fall. And on the right-hand side here, those are some signs that we already have out in the community in key areas that reinforce some highlight wildlife messaging that came out of our work with the Human-Wildlife Coexistence Plan, which is one of our key projects for the wildlife theme this year. Then A very important part of this campaign is we have one place to send people to learn about all of our key stories, and that webpage launched yesterday at canmore.ca/big stories. So if you load that up on your phone, you can get a quick glance at all of these major projects with quick links to where people can learn more about each one. So as I mentioned, our website is now live, and we'll be running our first print advertisements to launch the campaign starting this Thursday. So keep an eye out for that. And look out for additional stories related to this campaign that will start going out in earnest this fall. So this is our first year of this campaign, but as the community becomes more familiar with this approach over year to year, our hope is for the Big Stories approach to become a recognizable and trusted communications tool that enhances community understanding of our town's work and can also serve as a really important tool for council to point to your successes in forwarding your priorities. And it's a one-stop shop for you to direct the community to a high-level summary of not everything we're doing as a community, but some of those hallmark projects. And on that note, while we're really excited about this new approach, it is not the only way we're going to be communicating with the community, and it will not capture every single project or priority. It is just one extra tool in our toolkit to create a more informed community. And with that, definitely we'll keep you posted with some of the other tactics that we'll continue to roll out in the community related to our strategic plan. But for now, that brings us to the conclusion of some of the successes we're seeing so far with shifting our approach to communicating with the community to meet that need, and the launch of our brand new Big Stories campaign. And we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I love the look of the campaign, and I love the Big Stories concept. Looking to council to see if there are any questions or comments. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Roberts, Ms. Hayden, for the presentation. What platforms are you guys going on for social? I heard Instagram at one point. What are the
Right
other
now
ones?
we're on Facebook and Twitter, and we are launching our Instagram account. It's not live yet,
Okay.
but we'll let you know
Okay.
once we're live on Instagram.
Great. A lot of this, like, I really like the formatting and stuff. A lot of it is text-based. Will there be video content down the road too? I find some people of certain demographics really appreciate moving content as well. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Like this is right now, what we've seen so far is the print-related material, but depending on the given story, like it might really make sense to have video components, and that will be something that we'll flesh out throughout the year as we share updates and initiatives related to each of the stories. So we're not limited just to
Okay, great.
to print.
Yeah, I really love the colors. It's awesome. Thank you.
Looking to see if there are any other questions or comments. Councillor Graham.
I noticed we had a focus on community as residents. What are we doing to communicate to the tourist community?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, our primary audience are residents. That's our number one focus. Visitors would fall under a secondary audience. So a piece of that is working with Tourism Canmore. And so we meet regularly with Tourism Canmore, their communications manager. And we've shared this information with them as well. So we try to leverage them as a partner in sharing some of the similar messaging that crosses those lines.
Thank you. One last one, if I might. Following up on Councillor Ma's question about socials, why not go to the TikToks and the Snapchats where the younger generations are there and paying attention, and engaging youth and democracy is a key component, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll start and then look to my colleagues to jump in if they want. Short answer, we want to be intentional with what we're doing and not just create more platforms to share the exact same thing, and we simply don't have the time to do that right now. So
fair.
And going to your first question, of course, I expect there'll be overlap. I mean, if you residents and visitors will see signs on paths, and we'll also see social media, potentially. Okay. Councillor McCallum.
I don't have any questions. I just had a comment that I really appreciate the fresh look of your campaign, and I've appreciated in the past the approach that your department has been taking. Not that I didn't appreciate the previous approach, it's just nice that we're shifting and changing. And it's young and bright and positive, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't see any other questions or comments, so thank you very much. And I'm very happy that this is now launched.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, then, we will move to item E1, Councillor Updates. These were larger updates given the passage of time since our last committee of the whole, and I'll just open it up. Does anybody have any questions on anything in the Councillor Updates? Councillor Graham.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on the TCK. I see the visitor spending is up 15.5%. Was that because of increased traffic or increased spending, increased people?
Just sharing the stats, man.
I will make those inquiries to those that can. Thanks.
But if you take a look at the, if you take a look at our markets and whatnot, and just through, you know, anecdotally, we are at beyond actually pre-COVID levels.
Right.
You know, so.
I think one of the things I was thinking about is traffic levels and traffic volumes and those stats compared to the spending stats. And I think this stat was up significantly more than the traffic stats are off the top of my head, but yeah, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions on Councillor Updates? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move to administrative updates. And we'll start with section A, just pulling it up here. Is there anything within section A, corporate strategic team? Looking, oh, Councillor Graham, sorry about that.
In light of recent events on the TC, on the Trans-Canada Highway, I was wondering if administration had any update on the progress of the fence by the province.
Ms. Smithers.
Yes, we've had a couple of meetings with the province. The most recent one was this past July. Our understanding right now is that they are hoping to tender the project this winter, and then they're looking at construction between spring and fall 2025.
Do you know when design will be made public? Is that at the tendering stage? Is that when we get to see when overpasses may or may not be there, or where they may or may not be?
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar enough with the province's process, but I can look into that and get back to council. I believe that the plan was to have detailed design done right around this time. So I can check with the province and get back to council.
Thank you. That'd be appreciated.
Sure.
And just to be specific, building on that request, it would be good to ask the province what, if any, initiatives they're taking regarding the fence to allow the movement of wildlife safely from one side of the valley to the other, and if they have put their design before a wildlife biologist. if that's possible, to
Sure.
ask when you're going back to them. That'd be great. Thank you.
Will do.
Any other questions under section A? Okay, moving to section B, municipal services. We can see if there's any questions there. Okay, moving to section C. Oh, Councillor Graham, sorry.
Sorry. Thanks. I was wondering if administration had any updates on off-leash dog fines year to date, what those numbers look like over the summer.
Mr. Mackay.
I just happen to have those stats in front of me. Yep. So year to date, dog off leash or domestic animal at large fines, we've had 40 citations and 46 warnings.
And what does that compare to last year?
Sure. So last year, year start to September 17th, 2023, so same period, was 125 citations with 34 warnings.
Sorry, what was this year's?
40 citations and 46 warnings.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I'd suggest with any statistic, I mean, either we're seeing increased compliance or people are choosing to take their dogs off leash elsewhere. Could be factors, but I would say our enforcement practices haven't changed significantly.
Thank you, Mr. McCarr.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions under section B? Okay, moving to section C, corporate services. Moving to D, municipal infrastructure. Did you hit your button or no? No, I didn't. Okay. Just wondering, is Mr. Sarte back yet?
He is in Jasper still until the end of this week. And then when he returns, I expect he'll have a few hours a week wrapping up some of the work related to recovery. And we are tracking his time, so we will be invoicing the town of Jasper for his time spent, and I think they will be applying for a DRP funding to cover that once, yeah.
I'm very proud that current and past members of Canmore administration are able to help out and that have that expertise to help out, whether it be Mr. Sarte or Mr. Soto or Mr. Fark, just to name a few. And I think it speaks volumes as to the quality administration we have, and also to our the importance of helping our neighbors.
Yeah, I was talking with Mr. Sarte today, and he definitely finds his skill set is useful there. He's glad he's there and able to help. And also, I do believe it benefits the town of Canmore because he's able to bring back some learnings from experiencing the situation in Jasper that already today we were talking about some projects we might want to look at going forward for just emergency management in town. So I think there's benefits all around, and I'm very proud of him and the other former staff that are up there as well.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions around section D? All right. I will now. Any questions around the council resolution action list? So none. Of course, there's a lot of correspondence there for information. Any questions arising from the correspondence? All right. Oh, Councillor Graham. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
You're quick on that button, and it just catches when I look that way, so.
No worries.
Thank you for your patience.
New system. Mr. McIver responds to us and saying he's not aware of any response by the town in regard requests for debt extensions on housing projects.
There hasn't been any formal application made. The communication originally was to request an exemption. Municipal Affairs advised that they were not willing to explore an exemption. However, they do take requests for exceptions. And so originally we had been thinking maybe there would be an exception sought around the CCH construction on Palliser.
Correct.
But that is not going to be required at this time. So that may be something that is explored in the future, is requesting an exception, but we're not going to need one, as far as I understand, on that one.
Thank you, sir.
So he's quite accurate that
Yep.
no exception has been received yet.
But we keep that card open for potential
That
future.
card is always open.
Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you. Okay, good question. Any other questions on the correspondence? Just to provide an update on a couple of these, I am getting a meeting with Minister Fraser next week by Zoom. And I am continuing, I am wanting to continue to seek a meeting with Minister Schultz regarding the wastewater treatment plant, so a request has been made, and we'll hopefully get a response in the near future. Okay. All right, seeing nothing else then, I move that we adjourn. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.